Considered so bad it's good by a chunk of the Star Trek fandom, the Star Trek The Next Generation episode The Royale would be filled with one-dimensional characters and dramatic plot twists that would make the crew of the USS Enterprise D shake their head in disgust. But in this case, the drama on screen was no match for the drama behind the scenes, and today we find out all about it. Hello and welcome to Backtrek, a web series that focuses on the background information on any given topic in Star Trek. In this episode, we're taking a look at the Star Trek The Next Generation episode The Royale to better understand its place in Star Trek history. Let's start out by saying that at best, this episode, The Royale, was a below-average episode for Star Trek The Next Generation. Watching it for this behind-the-scenes review, I'm struck once again by that simple fact, and I had no real intention of making a Backtrek episode about it, at least yet. But needing more time for the next part of my historical overview, I realized I needed a few more Season 2 episodes to make, and thus far I had only bothered to make 2 of the best episodes from the season, so I began to research the worst ones, and The Royale was one of the ones at the top of that list. What I didn't know at the time was why this bad episode was made in the first place, and what I found out, though not surprising, saddened me. And this episode may have been one of the better TNG outings if a certain power that was had simply left his ego out of the whole project and left the episode alone. Unfortunately, though, that was not Maurice Hurley's way, and his interference would cement this episode's fate for all time. The Royale was pitched by writer Tracy Torme to Robert Lewin during Season 1 of the series. At that time, Torme had called his story idea the Blue Moon Hotel. In the original story, the crew of the Enterprise D would still come upon this planet and the revolving door. They would step through and be in an alien recreation of what they had felt astronauts from old Earth would love to live in, based on the book The Blue Moon Hotel, which one of the 7 surviving astronauts had with them when they were accidentally captured. The idea was that the alien species would have had some form of prime directive, and as such felt they could not return these intrepid space explorers back to Earth, and their return would have ended up tainting Earth's culture and influencing its development before humanity was ready to learn that aliens did in fact exist. And so, out of guilt and remorse, they quickly put together this recreation and settled the 7 human astronauts in this creation, leaving them to live out the rest of their natural lives under the watchful eye of the recreation's computer systems. The original story was far more surrealistic, and of course the alien species had only the book and the descriptions from that book, along with their own very limited knowledge of humanity, to work from. It also contained a lot of comedy and subtle satire within it, making it feel more like an original series episode, like if the TOS episode The Trouble with Tribbles had been married to a piece of the action and Spectre of the Gun. Tracy Torme was a writer and executive story editor for Star Trek The Next Generation during the show's first and second season. He also served as a creative consultant for the second season. He had a very close relationship with Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, who oftentimes would excuse Torme from some of the writing responsibilities, such as attending story break sessions or rewriting other people's scripts, though he did have a commitment to deliver 3 scripts each season that he worked. Maurice Hurley, who was the head writer of the show, and who Gene Roddenberry himself had appointed as de facto showrunner when Gene wasn't able to be around, disliked Torme immensely, and really the feeling was mutual. Torme was a talented science fiction writer who would create many great ideas for the show, and from what I can tell, most everyone loved both him and his ideas. Hurley, on the other hand, had never really written science fiction before, being a crime drama writer for the bulk of his career, and Hurley had a very unlovable personality that most around him simply hated. And so the clashing of these 2 titans of the show was inevitable, and came to a head here with the script for this episode. Having his story idea shot down for Season 1, Torme was eventually given the go-ahead to develop it for Season 2. Getting straight to work, Torme blasted out a great version of the script, one that after being passed around, the staff of the show felt it was a great and amazing story. Maurice Hurley, however, felt differently. Reading over the script, Hurley blasted it out of the water, saying Torme's premise was too derivative of Star Trek the Original Series episode, A Piece of the Action. Hurley recalls, "There were gangsters in this episode, and gangsters in that episode, and both were based on someone else's book." This seemed to be a thinly veiled manifestation of Hurley's jealousy of Torme, combined with Hurley's thirst for absolute power over the show. And so Hurley took Torme's script and completely rewrote it to become what we saw as the episode The Royale. Torme was both angry and devastated. He says, "I've completely disowned my involvement in this episode's creation. I suppose skeletally it's still my story, but when I started to reread the rewrite, I got 10 pages through it and I got sort of a cold chill and had to put it down. An interesting thing is that the cast, the crew, even the secretaries went out of their way to tell me how much they liked my original draft, and they asked me in a totally puzzled manner what on earth had happened and why had he changed it, and all I could do was shrug." And in keeping with his dismay over what Hurley had done, Torme refused to put his name to the project, opting instead for one of his writer's pseudonyms to be used, that of Keith Mills. This dispute between he and Hurley would result in Torme leaving active staff duty and taking the lesser role of creative consultant for TNG. Torme would contribute to only one more episode, Manhunt, where further script disputes, once again with Maurice Hurley, would lead to Torme finally quitting the show. This episode would be directed by Cliff Boyle, who certainly was no stranger to Star Trek. He directed 42 episodes within The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. He was even the director for the Season 3 and 4 two-parter, The Best of Both Worlds. Of this particular episode, Cliff had this to say: "I thought Tracy's original story was so much better than Hurley's. Different strokes for different folks, I guess. Just a little bit of Trek trivia for you all here, was that the original draft of Torme's script would have had Dr. Pulaski at one point say, 'I'm a doctor, not a magician,' a not-so-subtle reference to her character being intended to be more like Dr. McCoy from the original series. Hurley cut this line from the script." The original story would also have had a larger away team being down to the planet's surface and being caught in the Blue Moon Hotel. And while in this recreation simulation, the away team would in fact run into Colonel Stephen Ritchie alive and well. Of course, this wouldn't have been the case at all, rather the alien computer system recreating Ritchie to entertain the Enterprise D landing party. At one point, a female security officer would have been killed by the simulation, but she would be recreated by the simulation as well, and eventually being given the choice between remaining active in this ungodly simulation for the rest of time, or being turned off by the away team, allowing them to essentially rest in peace. Both Ritchie and the female security officer would decide to remain active in order to pursue their budding relationship. Another problem with this episode stemmed from budgetary concerns brought up by Paramount at the time. Season 2 of The Next Generation was going way over budget, and so in order to recover some of the money that they were losing, certain restrictions were being placed on all the episodes being made to get the budget in line. Cliff Boyle also recalls, "There were budgetary problems with the season. It suffered horribly from a budget situation, and this episode got cut back drastically. In my opinion, it was a rather claustrophobic show, but we did end up building a Vegas set out of nothing. We built the set with some curtains and a lot of tricks. Though in this case, the original surrealistic idea of Tracy's original script would have probably saved even more money for Paramount." Sam Anderson would guest star as the hotel assistant manager. Anderson is one of those faces of the 80s that seems to be in everything of the time, and he does a solid job in the role given what he had to work with. Similarly, Jill Jacobson, who played Vanessa, and Leo Garcia, who played the bellboy, also did do a fine job with their own characters. Noble Willingham would shine in the role of the Texan. He had an extensive acting career, appearing in many shows such as The A-Team, Home Improvement, and Murder, She Wrote, though he was best known for his role as C.D. Parker on the television series Walker, Texas Ranger. Gregory Beecroft would play Mickey D in this episode, and although the character is felt all throughout this episode, he only appears in one short scene. Beecroft would have an extensive acting career as a soap opera actor. After watching The Royale for this backtrack episode, it's really hard to picture what this episode could have actually been. The ideas presented by Torme's original script are fascinating, but the truth is we simply can't know if that script would have 100% assured a better or more beloved episode. But one thing is most probable, that it probably couldn't be any worse. So it's unfortunate that once again Maurice Hurley's interference would stifle a Next Generation episode that could have been much more than what it became. And the fact that the man himself was always unapologetic about his own bad behavior adds to a general feeling of hate for the man from the fan community, and is a clear example of the old adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But, like it or leave it, one thing about this episode is certain. Due to its really horrible nature, The Royale has earned its place in Star Trek history, even if it's only as an example of how not to make a Star Trek episode.
Next time on Star Trek The Next Generation.
Seems like we're trapped in here.
Proceed with caution.
A dangerous mission uncovers a secret alien passage
Welcome to the Hotel Royale.
where the crew become prisoners in a fictional casino that's all too real.
Lock onto the landing party. Beam them up.
We've got nothing to lock on to, sir.
Now, they must gamble with their lives in a deadly game of survival on Star Trek The Next Generation.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Backtrack. What do you think of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode The Royale? How do you feel about Maurice Hurley and his interference in this episode? Well, leave your comments in the section below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, hitting that little bell icon so you won't miss a single video we release. Want to help the channel escape the clutches of Mickey D? Then consider becoming a channel patron. The link to our Patreon account is in the description below. Thanks again for watching. Live long and prosper. So, we went from a pretty good episode to a really bad one. Actually, I couldn't find many mistakes in this episode. I know, ironic, right? But one thing that did bother me was how Data had to explain the rules of craps to Riker. Now remember, Riker is one of the best poker players on board the Enterprise, and yet they want us to believe that he doesn't know anything about craps? In Encounter at Farpoint, the audience is told by Data that in the year 2036, the United Earth government existed.
Objection, Your Honor. In the year 2036, the new United Nations declared that no Earth citizen could be made to answer for the crimes of his race or forebears.
Objection denied.
When Picard, Data, Troy, and Yar are taken to Q's humanity trial. And Q tells us that the United Earth nonsense was over by the year 2079.
This is a court of the year 2079, by which time more rapid progress had caused all United Earth nonsense to be abolished.
That means when Colonel Ritchie's spacecraft was launched in 2037, the United Earth government was in full swing. Why then are the markings on this craft that of the United States? Wouldn't this be a United Earth undertaking? Just food for thought.